Okay, so here in Visual Studio Code, you can use whatever code editor you want. Here is the project that we just created, and we're in the Compare React folder. Okay, so somewhat of a familiar setup based on Vue.js, and it's also pretty similar when it comes to an Angular project. We have our Node modules folder here because we're using Node.js for this, which all three use. We have our public folder here. We don't have to worry about anything in there, but all of our code will reside here in source. And as you can see, it's very simple. The CLI creates just 7 files here initially. And one thing that's a little bit strange to me is that there's no folder organization. For instance, we have a logo graphic just stuck in here with over here. It would have been a little bit better if they could create an assets folder off the bat, but really first world problems, right? Not a big deal. So the main files that we need to worry about and all your components, they're just declared in just typical JavaScript files. So .js right here. We'll see we also have an index.js here. And this is what really helps get the project loaded up. We could see that we have a React DOM, we have a render, and we have our app ID passed in. And this is in reference to the component right here, app.js. All right, so the name of it, of course, is class app, and then we're exporting app to be used there in index.js. So there's a few differences, although also a lot of similarities when we're comparing these frameworks and libraries to each other. So at the top, which is consistent with all three of them, we have our imports up here. One thing that's pretty and quite different that sets React apart from Angular and Vue is we have the class app extends component. Really for Angular, this sort of thing, I want to say sort of thing, but within your class is really just designated for being solely for your component code. But when we have our class app extending here of a component, we have both the template, which is defined right here within this return. So all your templating, your HTML, although technically this isn't HTML, it is JSX, and I'll discuss that slightly in a bit, goes right here within this return. And then your component logic largely lies outside of render right here. So if you want to call or hook into component life cycles, for instance, you would do it out here. And we will do that once we develop our little landing page app. All right, so also your styling, you simply import your CSS file up top. So in terms of inline styling, that's something that's not done here in React, so we simply import it at the top. Okay, so what we want to do is create, just to bring about more structure. I don't want all of my component files, being relegated into the same directory. We're going to create a folder called components. All right, and inside of components, we're going to create just a few different component folders additionally based on our needs. So let's head on over to Adobe XD so I can show you the layout real quickly once again. All right, and here's the layout that we already designed and already did in Vue. And if we try to think about this in terms of component structure, again, this is going to be the same thing as Vue if you followed along there. First, we have our whole app interface, and this is really where we would structure everything, and we would consider it the actual app, or in other words, this right here. This is the starting point of the app. Going further into that we have our header here, our navigation. We also have a footer. Now, these are two elements of our layout that we want to remain the same, and we want to remain present in all pages. So we can create components out of those. And then we have this middle section here, our content section, and this would be the content that's shown, when they're at the home page. And then this inner content here is where they would be shown when they're at, like for instance, a fact page. So there's really 3 different things happening here. We have a header, we have this intersection here, and then we also have a footer. So let's go ahead and create these elements consistent with that. So back when we were working within Vue, we didn't create components specifically for header and footer. We just stuck it right here in not this file because we're working with a different, but in terms of structure, we didn't create components. Here, I'm going to show you how to create components out of those headers and footers just for two different purposes, just to show you how to import or nest in another component, but also to show you how to create two different types of components. One is stateless, which I will explain shortly. So what we want to do is go ahead and create these files real quickly. So the first, rather folder. So the first folder we'll call header. And inside of here, we're going to create a few files. All right, so first, this header is going to be header.js. All right, let's also real quickly create another one. This will be footer, create another one. Oops, we don't want to create it inside of there. We'll create another one for FAQ, and then finally one more for home. Keep on doing that, sorry about that. All right, so we have our two pages here for home and footer, or sorry, home and FAQ rather, and then also our header and footer. All right, so the first thing, of course, we'll focus on momentarily is the header section. All right, so what we'll do is in app.js real quickly, we're going to just change things up just slightly here within the template. So I'm going to get rid of everything between this app class tag here. And by the way, when it comes to JSX, you can see there's some slight differences. For instance, when you have a div and you're trying to specify a class, it's not class equals app, it's class name equals app. Very important, otherwise your app will break. All right, so one thing we need to do is import the header. So at the very top, we did create that header file already. So I'm just going to copy this real quick. Actually, we don't even need logo, so I'll just change that real quick. So import header from components, header and header. All right, great. So we'll save that. And inside of, let me take this real quickly, Control A, Control C to copy all. Let's go over here and just paste this in. Now for our header, we're going to get rid of that. And we will also include a header CSS file a little bit later, but we're not going to worry about that for now. All right, so we need to change this here to header. And we also have to export header right here. So inside of here, all I'm going to do is just type in my header and save it. Now let's go back to our app.js, and inside of here, what we want to do is import that header component that we just created. So to do that, it's very simple. We just come in here. We open it up like it's a HTML element essentially. So header, and close it out like that. So we'll save. And this is what the app should look like so far. Very ugly, but let's keep on going anyhow. So we also want to create a footer. So down here, we'll create a footer. At this point, the app will break because we didn't actually create the file. So let's take this, we're going to copy that. And for our footer, let's create a new footer.js. All right, and we're going to paste that in. All right, so remember when I mentioned there's two different type of components in React. We have a stateless component. This right here is a stateful component. So you have stateless and stateful. And when it comes to your stateful components, which is what we've been using right here so far, the way they're declared is we import React and component from React. Now, if we want to transform this to a stateless component, then we remove the component import, and we also change this line right here. So the way we do this is instead of class header extends component, we do const footer, the name of our component here, equals function, arrow function, just like that. And this down here also has to change as well. So what we do is close that parenthesis, and then also the bracket right here. And we also do not have a render method there. All right, so now this has been transformed from a stateful to a stateless component. Now, long story short, use a stateful or a stateless component rather when it comes to components that you know aren't going to need any type of access to what's called the state or any type of really functionality. Okay, so for our footer, we know there's nothing really happening in our footer aside from just static template information. All right, so right down here, I'm going to change this to my footer. Okay, and we also have to make sure we export footer. Then we'll go back to our app.js and we're going to import footer. This will be footer. I keep on doing that with my caps lock. Sorry about that, guys. There. Now we can go back to our app. And we have my header and my footer. Now a little bit later on, we're going to, inside of here, put in our routes, which will load our two components, of which being home and FAQ. But before we get to that, in the next section, we're going to focus on integrating our Balma CSS responsive framework. All right, so we'll get started then.